Hey, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you a review for Project Cross Zone, which I referred to as Project X Zone in the unboxing because I didn't know any better. The last 2 weeks have been pretty awesome in terms of playing and reviewing games. I played through The Last of Us, which is one of the best games I've played on the PlayStation 3. I've been testing out the Final Fantasy XIV online beta, and this week I got to use 4 different consoles for my reviews. Hotline Miami, which was a surprisingly fun game on the PS3 and Vita. Deadpool, which ended up being a really fun game on the Xbox 360. And now we come to Project Cross Zone on the Nintendo 3DS. I've managed to play through 20 of its 40 chapters this week, and I will be reviewing it based off of that, which was roughly around 19 hours of gameplay. This title has 25 years of gaming history behind it, with 60 characters pulled from an assortment of titles, and also the battlefield locations were pulled from 20 different games. So if you've been around the block a few times when it comes to video games, you're going to enjoy this title even more than the younger generation. It's also worth mentioning that every pair of characters have a theme song relevant to the game that they came from that begins playing the moment that you take control of them. So for example, when Ryu and Ken step in, you'll hear a very familiar but remixed version of a Street Fighter theme. As great as this title is, there are a few downsides, keeping it from being the game worth knocking down your grandmother and breaking a display case in order to get your copy. The 3D visual aspect is very timid. Other than the menus and anime characters popping off the screen during the cutscenes, it's kind of hard to tell there's much going on with the 3D at all. And yes, I've heard some people say that the 3D sucks on all the games, but that's just not the case, especially if you've played Paper Mario or Super Mario Kart. There's plenty of very nice looking 3D effects in some of these games, but this isn't going to be one of those titles. Luckily, the game looks amazing without the 3D effect, and it's arguably one of the best looking titles for the 3DS in general without it, so the non-3D factor can easily be overlooked. By far the weakest link in this explosive title is its story. An evil force is on the rise, and the cast of the game starts crossing over into each other's worlds, hence where the cross in the title comes from. So it's your group of good guys against a big group of bad guys that also come to an agreement to band together, and the two forces collide. This sounds pretty cool, and it should have been fun watching all this play out, but the writers tried too hard to get the entire cast involved in all of the cutscenes, so it ends up being a big, corny, convoluted, jumbled up mess. If they had just focused on a few characters in the cutscenes opposed to trying to fit everybody in there into the story and give everybody their own 15 minutes of fame, then it would have been a lot better for sure. The final downside, which I was personally really disappointed with, is the fact that you're never really given full control of your party. So the micromanaging element is at a minimum on here. For the title to be listed as a strategy RPG featuring this many awesome characters, you would really hope that you could build, customize, tweak, and gear up your group, but it's all very restricted. Unlike more traditional strategy role-playing games such as Final Fantasy Tactics, there's no open world map, which eliminates any access to grinding or going back and playing any of the previous stages. You jump from one map to the next, and your party that's sent into the battlefield is predetermined by the computer, so you're not actually picking who you want in your party. It's all set up for you. The only adjustment that you can make is with the third member that you can attach to your pairs of characters, which changes their solo attack feature and a couple of their abilities that's used in combat. I also found it quite irritating that I couldn't select where I wanted my characters to start off on the map. The computer places them wherever it sees fit, and that's just how it is. Strategy RPGs are one of my favorite genres of games to play, so it was a lot of little things like that, in my opinion, that stops this title from being perfect, because it just takes so much control away from the player. There is a training mode that lets you do battle, but you don't level up in any way inside of it. This linear progression also means that you're not going to get access to some members until very late in the game. A good example of that would be Mega Man and Zero, which aren't accessible for the first half of the game, which was a real bummer. You do get 2 equipment slots for each character, but the gear has very little impact on your characters, usually just adding a little bit of attack, defense, health, or an immunity to a status ailment. There are no towns to visit, with all the items that you receive coming off chests or enemies off the battlefield. Your characters do level up and you unlock new moves, but you do not have any say in the level up process, which even if you did, your characters don't have traditional RPG stats to adjust anyways. So long story short, the RPG element of this game is very weak. If I had to categorize this title, I'd place it as an arcade-ish strategy game, heavy on action with very light RPG elements attached to it. The saving grace, however, is going to be the battle system. It's downright spectacular, and it's the driving force that steers this title back to its must-play status. To explain how the battle system works, each character has a set number of moves that they can use once combat is started. While combat may resemble Marvel vs. Capcom with its flashy combos and special moves, you're not actually button mashing like a madman to make it all happen. Most battles are done with just a few button presses, but the timing for each press is what keeps it interesting and not feeling like it's all automated. If you time your hits right, it will activate critical hits, and each successful hit will build a special meter, which the game refers to as XP, not to be confused with experience points, which most other role-playing games refer to XP as. Before each battle, you can use XP to do a number of different things, such as boosting your attack, healing status elements or health, adding counterattacks, or nullifying an enemy's counterattack. If you save up 100 XP, you're given a super move that any character can use, and everyone in your party shares the same XP bars, so deciding who you want to trigger the special move is also another decision that comes into play. And that's where most of the strategy in this game really comes from, managing and using your XP wisely, but also placing your characters in the proper position on the battlefield to assist one another, and managing your limited item resources are both important as well. I've read a couple of the reviews in which the reviewers have stated they thought the game was hard or challenging, and while I haven't played through the entire game yet, the first half has been an absolute breeze. Granted, I'm used to playing strategy games similar to this one, but I've yet to lose a single member in battle. Unfortunately, there's no difficulty option on here, so everybody's going to play on the same universal difficulty setting, which most likely is going to be easy for those experienced in this genre, or more challenging or difficult for those new to strategy role-playing games. A few months ago I did a Vita versus 3DS video in which I stated that I felt the 3DS was a better system because of the amount of great exclusive titles that were already available on it, which I've had the handheld since February and I haven't come close to getting bored with it yet. And now with Luigi's Mansion 2, Etrian Odyssey 4, Fire Emblem, Monster Hunter, Castlevania Lords of Shadow, and now Project Cross Zone, it's hard not to notice the amount of juggernaut titles that have been releasing this year in the US on this handheld. And I know I spent a good portion of this review discussing the title's negative aspects, but I want to make it very clear that if you own a 3DS, then this is a must-buy title if you enjoy this style of game, even with its downsides. And with 40 to 50 hours of gameplay waiting on you to play through this game, you're going to have your hands full for a while, and it's extremely hard to put this game down once you get wrapped up into it. The battle system is nothing short of beautiful to watch in motion. Even if you're not familiar with a lot of the games that each of these characters was pulled from, it's simply amazing watching the explosive combat play out, with each move having very detailed, colorful animations worth watching over and over again. While this title might not fit into the typical mold of most other strategy role-playing games, it's definitely a day one purchase if you can find a copy. Anyways, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and thanks for stopping by.